Welcome back to Work Inspired. I'm your host, George Lucas Pfeiffer, and today we're talking to the CEO of vFairs, a virtual events company that has experienced massive success and growth over the last 12 months, thanks to the remote nature of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, you might be wondering why a podcast that's produced by BOS, which is a commercial interiors company that thrives on people coming together in person, would want to showcase a leader and a company that virtually lives in the digital space. Well, as you'll hear on today's episode, the future is not in person or remote. It's both. A hybrid combination of physical and digital spaces that is uniquely designed to maximize the opportunity for the businesses, teams, and work involved. Let's not waste another moment. You're about to hear from Younas, the expert himself. Let's get ready to work inspired. Younas, thank you so much for being here. So excited to talk with you today. Thanks for agreeing to be on the Work Inspired podcast.
Thanks, George, for having me.
So I like to start off by having the guests just tell a little bit about themselves, tell their story. Tell me about your professional journey so far, leading up to what you're currently doing with vFairs.
I did my bachelor's in computer sciences and went to University of Texas at Austin to do my master's degree, again in computer sciences. Right after that, I got a job with IBM, so worked over there for a couple of years. Then I got a job with one of the job sites. Over there I started as a quality assurance team lead. I was there to set up their QA department. And while I was in that job, one day the CEO of that company said, I want to build kind of an entrepreneurial team within the company. So they started giving us projects, right? Which is, again, these are some projects that if any one of you can kind of go ahead, dig deeper into it, try to run it on the side, that will be great. Otherwise, you're responsible for whatever your job is. But these are things on the side if any one of you is willing to, spend some time on your extra time. So it's at that time, we looked into some of the problems we wanted to solve, and vFairs was one of the problem that was more like a side project that we started building as part of just, again, more like an internal entrepreneurial project within this parent company. So build that, and then pretty much went from a QA team lead to, first of all, a product manager. Once we have built the product, no one was using it, no one was buying it. So then you have to become a sales manager, try to sell it, or become even a marketing manager, try to market it. Once we were able to sell it, then we have to deliver it. So you have to become a customer success manager to deliver it, and then really go back in the same loop, try to keep on reinventing the product, building new features, and try to keep on selling, right? So, I think once the product became successful, just because I had built it, naturally, it led me to be the CEO of the company. But otherwise, it all started with a side project, hobby project for the company that eventually became bigger than the parent company itself, right? So that's how it all started.
That's a very cool story in the fact that it was a growth story within a large organization, but also I think probably set you up nicely having to wear all the different hats, right? You were the entrepreneur, but having the nice big parent company to kind of fund it and get you through those early stages, I think was probably also a nice thing to have. Tell me about a little bit more about what is vFairs? What does it do and how is it different?
Sure. So vFairs is a virtual events platform. Any organization who want to run a medium to a large scale event use vFairs platform to connect attendees with exhibitors, sponsors, speakers. The idea of vFairs is that any big physical event that you are doing, you should be able to run it online. You should be able to get all the benefits of a physical event, but the idea is to remove all the hassles and inefficiencies that comes with a particular physical event. And again, what inspired me to create this business was literally when I was a university graduate, I used to go out there in actual physical job fairs, the university job fairs where I have to stay in the line for hours just to get chance to talk to an employer for 2 minutes. And there would always be this one guy who will take 30 minutes, 45 minutes with the recruiter while hundreds of other people are waiting on the line. And I was like, there has to be a better way of doing these things. So when we had this chance to do a side project, hobby project within this big parent company, I was like, I want to solve that problem, because anyone and everyone I have asked who have attended any big physical event realize that there are just so many inefficiencies that happens in that particular world, and the idea was to solve them for the entire industry.
So one of the reasons I was really excited to have you on this podcast was our two worlds are fairly different. We're in commercial interiors, which thrives on people being together in person. Yours is a virtual space, but the world in which we live in now is very quickly approaching a hybrid of those two spaces. We are coming hopefully out of the pandemic and into a place where it will be a mix of in-person and remote, as we've just been in a very remote situation for over a year now. Because of COVID-19. Before we get there, though, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the vFairs technology. Obviously, we're very familiar with Zoom. That's what we're recording this podcast on. We've all been on Teams calls, and we've probably been in more virtual meetings than we would have liked over the past 12 months. So tell me, what makes vFairs different than, say, a normal video conference?
Sure. So, a normal, typical video conference like this one, usually does not represent what happens in a physical event. So people go to a physical event because they are memorable. There is always a theme around any physical event. You go out there because there would always be a lot of sponsors, exhibitors exhibiting their branding. So even though we are on this Zoom call, we don't know whether it's your Zoom call or mine Zoom call. There's no real branding or life to this particular meeting itself. And what we see in a lot of virtual event platforms out there that exist in the market, they are literally flat file 2D websites with a chat feature. They are what I would call just enhanced Zoom meetings. vFairs is very different. vFairs was built on the principle that we want to mimic a physical event, because in its entirety, we actually like physical events. We feel that there's a lot of value that gets added in a physical event. It's just that any physical event, just because of their geographic location, will have always its limitations, right? And you want to make sure that how the same sponsor, the same brands not only get to talk to people who are in that physical event at that time, but can really really brand themselves to a much wider audience who is not in that particular physical location. So one thing that's very different about vFairs versus anyone else, whether these are video meeting tools like Zoom or Teams, or whether they are other virtual and platforms that exist out there, is the look and feel of it. Our customers love how vFairs events look like, because it represents their brand, it represents their company, and it allows them to market and sell it a lot more better than a meeting platform. Sure. That's one. Then we have been doing this for a very long time. In many other cases, a meeting platform, you'll have to cater, or you'll have to maneuver your use case to use a certain platform for your purpose. So while people can use a Zoom or Teams or any other platform for a job fair or for an open day or for a conference or a trade show, in many cases, they won't get the same benefit that they used to get in a physical event. Whereas we have the depth of feature set, depending on what kind of an event you plan to run, that allows you to really maximize the benefit of that particular event itself. Maximize the interaction between attendees and exhibitors. So it looks very different. It has a lot of depth of feature set. It allows you to run events of any scale. So Zoom or Teams is really good for 2 people, 20 people, maybe 50 people. But we're trying to run an event with 10,000 people or 20,000 people, something like a Zoom or Teams or most of the other platforms won't work. So we have the scale also out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting, that space visualization piece, the mimicking a real actual place, I think is a big component. It's something we do in our industry, trying to allow our customers to see their space before it exists. And in your case, it's taking a space that maybe exists or hypothetically exists and trying to make it as real as possible for the people attending through a computer, through a remote environment. You talked about 10,000 people or these large scale events. I'm sure that one of the stresses with hosting an event is just making sure that it goes right. That you put so much time and effort into this one single instance, that's got to be one of the biggest headaches. I know from my limited experience in planning a wedding or, planning certain marketing initiatives for our business, that was one of the big stressors. Is there a way that vFairs solves for that pain point for your customers as well?
Sure. George, I'll be honest with you, right? So see, what you guys do, which is running physical events with 1,000 people or 10,000 people, is a lot more stressful and is a lot more hard work than doing this virtually. With virtually, most of these technologies are highly scalable. We have been doing this for a very long time. So it has never been an issue to really have a platform that can accommodate 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 people. It's really about how do you match the right person with the right audience, because in the bigger scheme of things, you can have more people, but you don't want noise, you don't want inefficiencies. And what our technology allows you to do is not only let these people come online, but also then match them with exactly the right person, right? So imagine, again, a job fair, right? You want to make sure that the employer who's going to end up talking to the job seeker, they have the vacancy and this is a person always fit on the vacancy, versus someone who's standing on the line for hours only to find out, maybe the employer don't have the vacancy. Similarly, if you are doing a trade show, you wanna connect the buyer and sellers, the people who have the mutual interest, right? So that's where technology helps, and it takes time to scale it. We have gone through that journey many years before. At this point, it's really reaping the benefits of a lot of hard work that has already gone into making this platform extremely scalable already. Very
cool. How many events have you guys hosted?
So last year we hosted close to 2,000 plus events. Wow. In those 2,000 plus events, there were around 50,000 plus exhibitors who participated. Wow. Over 3 million plus attendees attended those 2,000 plus events, and we served customers from 50 plus different countries, right? So quite a global organization as well as global clientele. Yeah.
I think you mentioned also before that you experienced something like 2,000% growth last year.
Yeah,
Is
so
that true?
So we went from almost 30 people to 250 people. So we had to grow our team almost 8 times. And this was just because the demand that we had from just the customers who were knocking on our doors to use our platform to run the event. We had around 2,000% growth in terms of our revenue.
Congratulations. So one of the kind of the components of this podcast actually is talking about growth and talking to entrepreneurs and business leaders to see how do they handle it and how do they effectively navigate a high growth situation. How was it scaling up that quickly? Were there certain things that were more difficult than you anticipated, or other things that worked really well for you?
Sure. It has been difficult on some part, and again then easy on some part. But I'll quickly explain you the most difficult part when you are in a situation like this. So when you're in a situation like this, what happened is that a lot of entities wants to run virtual events overnight. They are willing to sign the contract with you. They're willing to pretty much pay you any amount that you're going to request. But as a leader of an organization that's not there just for the short term, but for the mid to long term, you have to say no to certain customers who you feel are not ready to really run a successful event. Because the way we feel about the virtual events industry is that if you're taking someone's money, you have to work with them to deliver on that great event. Again, it goes back to that physical event. You mentioned wedding day, right? You want to make sure that if you are signing up with 2,000 plus customers for their wedding day, all of them has to go absolutely well. You cannot compromise on the quality of your service, right? And for many of these people, they were doing the virtual events for the very first time. In theory, you can give them technology and walk away because that's what your legal obligation is. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure that not only we are giving them the technology to run a virtual event, but also an amazing customer support so that they can run a very successful virtual event. We don't want to leave them alone at this very difficult time where they have to just change their plans overnight to deliver on it, right? So The hard part was saying no to a lot of customers because we just felt that their timeline in many cases is just not realistic, or they themselves are not ready, and would rather not be someone who's not the right partner for a particular customer, right? That was the hard part. But again, otherwise, we were always very customer centric, customer heavy. We grew our post-sales team always first before we grew our sales team, because we wanted to make sure that we can always deliver what we are signing up first before we get in more customers. And it was 24/7 work for the past literally 1 year, but it has been absolutely worth it. If you'll go on G2 or Capterra, you will see that there are hundreds of companies who will just really, who will swear on our customer support and the kind of service we have given them. And once you go back and reflect on that, what you have helped your customers with throughout this past 1 year, all of this has been absolutely worth it.
That's congratulations. That's remarkable. Now you've got 250 employees, much more than 30. You're in 10 countries. You have been remote, I think, in your workforce for about 5 years. Tell me, how do you keep a company culture strong and prosperous with that kind of a situation?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and something that we have been, I think, getting a lot lately, right? See, if you are totally new brand organization who have almost never met with each other, never seen each other, it's hard to build that culture from ground up, right? Because a lot of these new employees, who would share their opinions and their ideas, on a hallway conversation, they don't know. Some of them are shy. They don't know whether they can do that on Slack. They cannot do that on Slack. As you're growing your company really, really fast, a lot of conversations are purely about work. It takes an extra time to really get to know someone personally. So what we have always done within our organization is that we have daily huddle calls, weekly calls, and each manager is pretty much obligated that, you need to have that personal one-to-one call with everyone, where it's not about just work. You need to give them the confidence that their opinion and their ideas are always welcome. They can do that in a weekly town hall that we have in our company, or they can do that within their daily huddle or weekly meeting with their managers. But they're all highly encouraged to share their opinion and ideas and give feedback, and where they see things are good, bad, or ugly. You have to do that at a personal level as a manager with your team. Unless you do that, it becomes very hard to instill the culture that you would have otherwise built in a physical office in a remote team. We have been doing this for the past 5 years, so we already knew the drill on how to go about it, because we were a remote first company to begin with. But I think for a lot of new companies, it's something new that at least we have been educating that has worked out well for us, and we would love for others to try it out also.
Yeah. I mean, part of I think what your platform allows companies to do is to enable or strengthen, promote their culture and their brand through the experience that you have that's kind of custom tailored to them, even though it's in a remote space and not in a physical space. I'm interested, with all the different events that you've hosted, what's one of the most unique things that you've seen a company try to do virtually that was maybe surprising to you even?
Many of them. I would say that, I almost never thought the number of use cases that the platform can be used for. I'll just give you a few, but we have had a company who did a virtual boat show with us, which is, again, they are online trying to showcase their boat, and people are actually online bidding to buy that boat. And I just never realized that it can happen in an online environment where people are making bids worth $100,000, $250,000 in an online environment when they're seeing this boat online, right? So we came across that. We came across big companies trying to run a happy hour using our platform. I didn't realize that people would be interested in that one. But again, a lot of these big companies care about the culture, care about the happiness of their team, want to do something fun in a very personalized, branded, unique environment. So they ran a lot of those happy hour sessions with us. We have done some of the biggest food shows. So one of the governments in one of the countries is trying to showcase their SME companies to a totally different country in a totally different time zone. So there are hundreds of vendors represented by one government, and then there's this other government where you have thousands of buyers trying to connect with these hundreds of vendors, right? Almost never thought that there can be such a close collaboration between two governments, such big companies across totally different time zones, right? And I can go on. There have been virtual wedding shows. Never realized that people would do a virtual wedding show using our platform, but there have been many also in the past 1 year.
Very cool. And I can imagine too, I think one of the downsides of an in-person event is that sometimes transferring to the digital space afterwards to continue to network and follow up and to continue to make that 1, 2, 3 days fruitful beyond the event itself is maybe a challenge sometimes. But with yours, I'm guessing there's a lot more opportunity just to continue the conversation or continue the collaboration and engagement after the event's officially over, right?
Yeah. And again, I think, over here, it just comes naturally, right? Because we are all used to, using tools like, LinkedIn or Facebook or other channels to really keep on having that conversation going in an online environment. So yeah, when the starting point has been in an online environment to begin with, where the connection has been made, just carrying on those conversations using the same platform is just naturally a lot more easier. So yeah, at least with online environment, you get that edge over a physical one.
So first of all, congrats on your success. It's a great story. It sounds like a wonderful platform. Now I want to talk about what I've been dying to ask you is, as we move forward and people, there's clearly a desire to get back in person to some extent, right? I mean, we've all missed the community, the camaraderie, the in-person engagements that we've kind of been stripped of it this last 12 months. So knowing that there's going to be that in the in-person experience, but that we've also now been primed to be a lot more accepting of and comfortable using technology. What are some of the ways that you see blending the two together, potentially having a service or solution like yours be something that can be used in conjunction with an in-person event so that really you can maximize your total opportunity?
Sure. Josh, I totally agree with you. I think a lot of us just want to go back to normal, right? Because there's this pent-up demand that we want to go back and be part of some social setting or some physical gathering, right? I would say they are. In many cases, these companies have now tried virtual, and we can literally see 3 different types of customer base, right? There is one who is digital first, right? In this new world, these people have never done a physical event before. They saw this new world and they came up with a lot of new business ideas that can help solve problem in this digital world. So you can imagine they are only digital first and they only know how to run virtual events. So there's a demand for that. That's one bucket. There's another bucket where some of the physical event platform providers have realized that doing virtual in many cases might be a lot more efficient for their core audience, right? So again, I keep on giving back example of a job fair. A job fair is where job seekers, employees are trying to connect with each other. You have long waiting lines. And in many cases, a lot of these companies who are doing job fairs or open days or some of the trade show conferences have realized that, there are always going to be some drawbacks of doing it virtual, but in the bigger scheme of things, the benefit it provides, whether it's the scale or the reach or the ROI, is just better here. And you have, of course, this one big bucket of people who want to go back to physical one because, there's nothing better than seeing someone face to face, shaking hands of someone. But they have realized that with this virtual, you have a totally different audience with a totally different scale and reach that you were missing out for so long just because you never tried out virtual. So you will see in future, the physical events are going to be a lot more better just because, people realize that, for certain things, there's nothing better than physical events, be it a concert or many other things which just cannot be replicated in a virtual environment. In many other cases, you will get a lot more better customer base coming to physical events because, I think given the time, not everyone would be able to travel for at least for the short term to medium term, right? You'll have a much better quality of exhibitors and attendees, but these organizers are already considering having virtual as part of their business strategy because they have realized they can reach out to a totally different audience at a much wider scale through virtual also. So future is going to be a lot more hybrid. You will have physical events and they will come back with full speed in certain areas, but almost all of them, if not most of them, would have a virtual component to it, whether in parallel or whether one after the other, depending on how the event organizer want to run it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think before COVID, I was invited to attend a couple in-person events virtually, but it was very much an afterthought, like you said. It was watching a really far away live video feed, very unengaging, or maybe it was even just an on-demand recap of the PowerPoint slides. So clearly you didn't feel like you're a part of that event. Same thing, I think, in the workplace. Like we had remote work before the pandemic. We had Zoom. We were integrated with it, but even the layout of a boardroom, of a meeting space, it was very much set to accommodate the people there. The people that were remote, we're almost on the outside looking in. I'm really interested to see, and I don't know if it's something that you guys have started thinking about, but like that concept of hybrid, like what does it look like? How is it different? Is it just they run in parallel to one another and you got the virtual component over here and the physical component over here? Or are they somehow integrated where you've got people standing at an exhibit, in person, but at the same time, there's a virtual component set up somehow where you can almost engage with those other attendees, even though they're not there right with you.
George, we as a company are investing a lot in the hybrid, but before I answer it purely from a feature set perspective, I just want to give you one quick survey result that we have already done, right? So as you go out and as we speak to these hundreds of our customers who already have done physical before, are doing virtual now, and if you ask them what their strategy for hybrid is, in many cases, you will get at least, if not more, 20 different answers. So while the shift from physical to virtual one was a very easy one and a very clear one, that, I was doing a physical event, I have to do virtual.
Yeah, it was forced.
It was an easy answer.
Yeah.
But from a virtual one to the hybrid one, there are just so many different options in terms of what can happen, that can exist. And even from a customer perspective, in many cases, there's no absolute clarity of really what they would want to do, right? I won't try to really make this answer complex, but I'll just try to answer it high level using 3 different options that exist out there. In many cases, customers think that we might want to keep physical and virtual separately. We want to run physical one for our core audience because, the nature of their business, demands that. But they would also want to run virtual, and many of them, because it's easier to run, it's more cost effective, and that will help them reach out to a much bigger audience that they never reached out before, and that we won't come to a physical one just because it's not the same world that we are living anymore, right? So they're running physical one and virtual one separately. So you can call them hybrid, but they're not really hybrid, right? They're just happening one after the other.
Sure.
A lot more virtual and that one physical one. Then you have physical and virtual happening at the same time because the companies realize that connecting the two audience is what their business model is, which is sometimes they are buyers, sellers, sometimes they are speakers, great speakers who won't be able to show up on a physical one. And it's really those speakers that people come for the physical one. And in that one, you have 2 different versions. You have one on the conference level. The conferences, these are great speakers who everyone want to listen. People are coming there to listen to them. Now, either they can be in person and attendees can be both in person and virtual, or these speakers are just unfortunately cannot be there in person and they are remote somewhere while the attendees are sitting in a physical place watching them in kind of a theater kind of a setting, right? It's like, you watching a movie, but that person is not in front of you. Same thing happens on an exhibitor level. You will have some really big exhibitors participating in physical event, trying to connect with your physical attendees, but then there are many exhibitors who cannot be now in that physical location, right? They were in different countries, they were in different states, and they're not going to travel in the short term, and they will be available online. So many different configurations, so many different models, and in many cases, every customer will select from the different configurations that we make them available what's best for them. As I said, the answer is not straightforward from what happened previous. The physical to virtual transition was a very easy transition. The virtual to hybrid one is a complex one, and it is very different for each customer.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity ahead and a lot of room for continual growth of your product and your solution. So great answer. I mean, it's fascinating stuff because it's super applicable to not only, conferences, trade shows, fairs, but also just to work in general, I think, and how we're all going to move forward in the coming years. So real fascinating. Younas, thank you. I'd love to finish with just a couple personal questions that are a little bit more related to you and your opinion. One being, you are a tech guy, and so I'm sure you're familiar with the latest and greatest tools and gadgets out there. What's been a resource that's been especially useful to you in your professional success?
I think I can. There are different tools where you get the benefit from them. So we use HubSpot a lot for our CRM activities, but the one that I think really make a big difference in the past 1 year has been Slack. So Slack is a tool that allows you just to connect with this 250 plus remote team, and just ability to connect over there to really praise people, to really create groups for those internal discussions has been just absolutely great in terms of just reinstating the culture that we already have in the company. So pretty much you would see in our entire company on Slack 24/7, just sharing news, sharing tips, sharing all the good news that are out there.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. It's a great tool. I often ask guests on the show, what are a couple characteristics of effective leaders, as you've observed? I'd like to maybe shift that question just a little bit, because you've been so involved in thousands of events that have been successfully or maybe less successfully executed. What are some characteristics of leaders that leaders share that are able to pull off really effective, impressive events? And what do they have in common?
Yeah, I think running an event is a very stressful job. You work for days, weeks, and months for that one day. One day or a couple of days, right? And the one thing that's just extremely important is how well you plan things just upfront. You just have to plan for this entire journey on all the way up until that day of the event itself. So I would say it's just really project planning, like how organized you are in terms of making sure that you have taken care of all the best tips and tricks, and you have actually applied that to your event leading up to that. We have been lucky that our customers have been great project managers, great event managers. And one thing that we on purpose did was just because they were doing it for the very first time in a virtual environment, we assigned them project managers so that even if they are missing out on something, there's someone looking up their shoulder, trying to let them know that, by the way, this is a deadline that you're missing. This is the kind of reminders that you're missing, and so forth, right? But I would say in most cases, it's really the hard work that you put would eventually pay off. And it all starts with how well you plan for these things upfront.
Sure. Yeah. And picking a great partner is probably important as well, right? The right platform, the right partner. Okay. Final question. If you were retiring today or tomorrow, what's a piece of wisdom or a piece of advice that you'd leave behind to whoever was succeeding you?
Yeah. See, I think in our case, it's just being extremely, extremely transparent and communicative from day one, right? So for us, we are very transparent with everything that we do. We would share with everyone what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, how much we charge, why we charge for that, etc. But the moment you remove any of the moment you decide as a company or as an individual that, by the way, I'm just going to be very transparent, very honest in each one file dealing, that just removes 90% of the burden from everything else, because you know that you're going to get into that call not trying to close a deal when you think that you're not the best vendor. Your main goal is that you want the best for the other person. And if that means that you're not the right partner for them or you're not the right fit for them, be it be, right? They would trust you and they will eventually work with you or deal with you or or recommend you for just being that honest, transparent guy. So as a company, as an individual, I think that's the best advice I got, and we have seen that our entire success of the company leading up to COVID or even after COVID, our entire business purely runs on referral. So it's our customers who would go and recommend other people to use vFairs. It's attendees of our customers' event who would then eventually become our customers. So again, this 2,000% growth or going from 30 people to 250 people or even leading up to 30 people, all of that has been purely because our customers see us as someone they can absolutely trust. So that's what
great advice. Great advice, great insight. Really excited to see where things are headed with vFairs. If people who are listening want to learn more, vFairs.com is your website. Is that right?
Yep. That's right.
Younas, can't thank you enough. This has been such a pleasure to speak with you. I really have enjoyed having you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.